Cool. Hey, everybody. My name's Aaron. I apologize for the issues with the audio. Looks like we're all set. I'm the Director of Growth here at Gatsby, and I wanted to thank everybody joining us from around the world today. So good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. So a little bit of housekeeping. We are recording this, so the recorded version will probably start now, and you will all get it afterwards. It'll be captioned, so it takes about a day for the captions to come through, and then we'll send it off to you. Questions go in the questions area, which a few of you are using now. I ran a poll a little bit earlier. It looks about 28% of you have a lot of experience with Gatsby images. About half of you said you have a little bit, and about 20% of you said you don't have any experience yet. So it's good to know. Thank you so much for sharing. That'll help us tailor our message to you today. So with that said, I'll kick it off to Matt and Obinna, who are software engineers who are going to be hosting us today. Thanks a lot.
Hello. Hi, I'm Matt. I'm a staff software engineer here at Gatsby. My colleague here is Obinna, who's also an engineer here at Gatsby. So for the past 6 months, I've been living and breathing images on the web while I've been working on the new Gatsby image plugin. In this webinar, I want to talk about the best practices in using images on the web and cover a bit of how Gatsby can help. But first, First, I want to give a brief history of images on the web. We just had an anniversary of images on the web, and we've had them for just over 25 years. But the way that people use them has hardly changed since the dawn of the web. When the web was first created, it didn't include inline images at all. They were just links that opened in a new window. But in 1994, Mosaic introduced the inline image tag. Now, it was a controversial addition at the time, but users loved it, and it helped Mosaic become the most popular browser. So if you've not heard of Mosaic, you've probably heard of its successor, Netscape. So this is an image tag from the Mosaic website in the mid-90s. And if you look at it, it looks a lot like an image tag that we'd use today. And of course, it still works fine. So you could load that in a browser and it would work absolutely fine. And I did when I was building this. In 1995, HTML2 was introduced, and with it came a standard for the image tag. Now, it included some important additions on top of the Mosaic original standard, such as the alt attribute. This is basically the same as an image tag that we use 25 years later. And this example here comes from a real site built in 1996 that was actually live until this week. Some of you might recognize it. This week, they finally changed it after just about exactly 25 years. So the two main image formats around in 1996, JPEG and GIF, are still in common use today. The following year, PNG came along, as did my colleague Obinna. But support for PNG was not great for several years after. Browsers didn't render it very well, and so it didn't get wide use for quite a few years after that. Now, GIF is still around, but it's mostly just stuck around in its animated form. PNGs have replaced them for most other uses. About a decade later, this trio were joined by SVGs, which are used for vector graphics. But otherwise, for the first 15 years of images on the web, these were basically all you got. 4 image formats, 3 of which are from the 1990s. So why are most images still in formats that are older than Obinna? It's not for lack of alternatives. In the decades since, there have been several formats that are improvements on JPEG, GIF, and PNG, but there was hardly any adoption. Here's a handful of them. By 2010 or so, each of the major browsers seemed to support one of these next generation formats, but of course they were all different ones. As developers, we were stuck because there was no easy way to get the benefits of these new formats when only one browser would support them. Everything changed in 2014, though, with the introduction of the picture element. This finally allowed developers to specify multiple formats. This just then would allow the browser to choose the one that it was able to display. It took a while, but by 2016, all the major browsers supported it, which meant we could safely use modern image formats in new browsers without breaking support for older browsers. The reason this works is because, as a general rule, if a browser doesn't understand the tag, it ignores it, but it still renders its contents. So older browsers just skip the picture and source elements entirely, and they just use the image tag. Well, modern browsers can pick the format that they support. So this here is a picture element. You can see it's got images in 4 different formats. And an old browser will just ignore the source and picture elements entirely, and we'll find the regular image tag that's stuck in there. So now we can, as soon as the picture element came along, we were able to start using all these fancy formats without worrying about browser support. So let's have a quick look at some of these youngsters. First one here is WebP, which we've covered over from the other slide. That's because despite being a next generation format, it's over 10 years old now, but it only got full browser support last year when Safari finally enabled it. It's based on Google's VP8 video codec. It gives smaller file sizes than both JPEG and PNG, and it supports both lossy and lossless encoding. It's a big improvement on the old formats, and now it's got really good browser support. So we enable that by default in Gatsby, and you should generally, just as a rule, use it because most people will be able to see it. Next up is AVIF. That's the hot new thing. It's also based on a video codec. This one is AV1. Depending on the source image, this can save anything from 10 to even 90% in file size compared to JPEG. And it's generally probably about 1/3 better than WebP in terms of file size for the same quality. It does take quite a lot of memory to encode them, and also can use quite a bit of processor as well. But it is a good format. Supporting Chrome landed last summer. Firefox has got support behind a flag at the moment. It should have been released already, but they had a few issues with color profiles, so they've delayed it slightly, but that should come very soon. WebKit has merged initial support, so maybe Safari will support it by 2030 or something. Next up is JPEG XL. This is yet another successor to JPEG. It seems to have even better results than AVIF, though I haven't personally done any testing on it. And it should need less memory to encode the images, which is a big deal because this is AVIF's big drawback that we've found. We know that people with certain build providers are having trouble with building AVIFs because it's got quite high memory requirements. So this one is, there is no browsers that support it at the moment, though there was an intention to ship this week for Blink, the Blink engine, which is the one used by Chrome and Edge and Brave and so on. So hopefully we should see some support for that later this year. Finally, here we've got WebP 2. This is so new that it doesn't even have a logo, so I've made it one, and they're welcome to use that one. This is the follow-up to WebP. Google is working on it, so presumably arrive first in Chrome. It remains to be seen how widely the browser support is for it. But the point about the picture tag is that you can add as many or as few of these as you want. And the browser will pick the ones that it's able to support. So you could, in theory, if you're building a site now, put a JPEG XL source in there because the format is finalized now. So even though no browsers support it, you can stick a JPEG XL tag into your picture tag, like so. And when a browser support lands, then it will just start working. So that's the beauty of the picture tag. Of course, in the last 15 years, something else came along, which was mobile devices. Before that, we could expect all sites to be displayed on screens that were roughly similar in size. But suddenly we were needing to support screens in many different sizes and resolutions. Now, luckily, at the same time as the picture element, browsers added support for the source set attribute on both the image and source tags. This makes it possible to provide multiple versions of an image at different resolutions, making responsive images a lot easier to implement. So this is an example of an image with a source set. The key with the source set is that it tells the browser about other sizes of the image. But if you specify them like this with widths, it isn't prescriptive. It's telling the browser about what is available, but it lets the browser choose which ones to download. So, for example, if you are trying to display a big full-width hero image on a massive screen, the browser will be able to download the large one. Or if you're on a mobile with a poor network connection, then it will download a smaller one. Generally, the idea is that you are promising that these are all the same image, but just at different resolutions, and just telling the browser to download whichever one it prefers. Now, if you're anything like me, this could be starting to get a bit overwhelming, and I'm sorry to tell you that it's going to get worse in a moment, but bear with me, there is a happy ending to this story. But this is the warning that I'm about to show you a modern picture tag. It will get you 100 on Lighthouse, and it will work great for your users, whether they have a massive widescreen display or a tiny little phone. But don't be scared when I load this up. So this is a best practice picture tag in 2021. This is for a full width image. It supports all browsers, offers next-gen AVIF and WebP format images with fallback JPEGs for older browsers. It's got multiple resolutions. It will support screen sizes from mobile all the way up to full HD. It uses lazy loading, so it doesn't download until it's on the screen. And now this will give you 100 in Lighthouse, and your users will love it. But look at all of those images that need to be generated. Look at all those tags. Look at all of these calculations that need to be put in there. And I haven't even included the CSS to make it scale nicely, or placeholders so it looks good when it's loading. So clearly, this is something that you are not going to do by hand. You need some tools. So we knew there had to be a better way. There should be a way to get the best performing, most responsive and accessible images on the web without worrying about resizing dozens of images and constructing complicated tags. We wanted to create a way to use images that was simple. So we realized we had to go back to the start. The original image tag could hardly be simpler. So we took it as our inspiration and built a whole new image plugin with developer experience first. There's no point in having great support for image formats if nobody uses them in their site. So the plugin that we've created is designed to be as easy to use as an image tag, but it supports all of the best practices available today. So I'm confident that this is the best of both worlds. So let's just have a look at how it works. This is how you would do a static image. So this is an image that doesn't change on each page, and it's just the same one that's used everywhere. Now, if you look at this, it looks a lot like a regular image tag. It doesn't even need the width and height because we extract them from the image and put them in ourselves. Dynamic images coming from a CMS are very similar. You put them like this, and it will give you fully responsive images served from a CDN. For example, if you're building a site with Contentful, it won't need to download any of the images. It will serve them directly from Contentful CDN in all of the correct sizes. And given these simple tags, it will create a full best practice picture tag, like the one I showed earlier, plus placeholders and blur up and everything that you could possibly need to give the best quality images to display on your site. So let's actually have a proper look at this. I'm going to hand over to Abina, who will help us have a proper look at the how to use the image plugin.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi everyone. So like Matt said, we're going to let's code like it's 1995. And I don't know if you saw the little jabs he was throwing at me, but like I couldn't code in 1995. But let me show you how. So we're just going to have that. So I've already set up a Gatsby site here that's doesn't have anything on it, but we're just going to add like 2 images to show you how the Gatsby image components better performance than normal images. So we're just going to have one image here and another image tag here, which is how like we would regularly like add images to our site. And then with images, you want to have a source for it, because obviously you want to save something, and you want to also have like an alt tag, because accessibility is important. It's important to have alt tags with your images. So I already have like some images like set up, and the first image I'm going to add there from using the URL is an image of a mountain. So because I already know what it is, I'm just going to put this in. Okay, a mountain view, and then the next image I'm going to add here, the same as above, is an image of one of my. So we're just going to like try to show 2 hero images, and this is like an image of my favorite superhero. This is a superhero image, and my favorite superhero is Deadpool. So I'm just going to add an alt tag here. Says Deadpool. Okay, so I'm just going to format this so it looks a little more presentable. And if we build this, let's see what it looks like in the browser. So if I run a Gatsby build, so usually when you run a Gatsby build, you would have to like run a Gatsby serve, but I'm already running the Gatsby serve in a terminal. So all I need to do is just build and go to the browser and show you how that works. So while this is building, we can go back to the browser now. You can see this at localhost 9000. The reason it's at localhost 9000 is because it's serving. So we're trying to build the site so that we can run performance tests on it in mobile view. So I'm just going to refresh this so that you see what's going on here. You can see that this image, the first hero image, is like really spanning out. So we might want to add like some sort of like styling to it. So I'm just going to add a bit of like styling to make it look better. And I'm going to add a width of 100%. Then we want to have like a max height of 600 pixels. And then I want to make the object like span across the cover of whatever viewpoint it's in. So I'm just going to make that cover, and we have to build again. So usually you would just develop this image locally, like run a Gatsby develop and have that work. But because we want to be able to, like I said, run some performance test on it, but I just want to make it look better now so that we can see what's going on. And this is, yes, really very fast, which is nice. So when we refresh this, you can see that the image now looks kind of like your typical hero image, and this one is just there. So let me look at the lighthouse scores for this image as it is. So if I run like a lighthouse on this, you can notice like that the image, or you can see that the performance is 66%. And the reason for this is because the image that we're serving is very big, and then we're trying to put it into a mobile view, so it has to shrink itself, and that's why the process of like shrinking itself to fit the viewport that it's in causes it to give like this bad. This is, I mean, it can be better, but it causes it to have this performance. Now, if I switch back to this bit here, and let's see some like improvement that Gatsby brings to the table. So I'm just going to change this image tag to use the static image, and like before you use this, you have to import it from the Gatsby plugin image, and this you just like npm installer or yarn add. And then I'm going to take away some of these stylings, because Gatsby's static image component comes with these by default, just for hero images. And I'm just going to leave this here, and I will build again. So I'm going to run the Gatsby build to, and while that's building, I always say that when you're doing like a demo, you should have like some elevator music, because when these processes are running, I'm just looking at you and you're looking at me, and we're wondering, okay, how fast can this finish? But yeah. So I'm going to go back to this place and close this. And when we refresh, you can see, I don't know if you notice something different, but visually you can't really see much difference, right? But then let's run a Lighthouse to see what's happening. We can see that the same images, just by changing the tag, has given us a performance of 99. And the reason for this, there are a couple of things that make this happen. So when we inspect the image, you can see that the image is served with a lot of source sets. So these are different widths for said image. And what this means is that the image is no longer struggling to like reduce itself to fit the viewport, thereby wasting time and costing you the loading time of performance. It's just saving the available width on like different source sets it has, which is what one of the benefits of using the static image component. And you can, if you want to like see what the actual image width looks like, we can come over to this network tab and just click on image. And let me just refresh this again, and we can double click on this. And then this is like the actual image width, and then we're just shrinking it down to fit our mobile, which is giving us very good performance. And then there are a couple of other things you can do with the Gatsby static image component. You can add, like, it has set a lot of options. So I don't know if you noticed when we well, let me check. Okay, I'm not messing with it. If you notice, like when we refresh this, you can notice that there are colors that are coming out here. Like it's showing us like some placeholder colors. So we can also set that here as an option, and you choose like different placeholders. So by default, it shows you the dominant color, but we can make it like show trace SVG as well. So I'm just going to copy this and add this to my other hero image here, and format that so that it looks better. Then when we build again, like I said, elevator music. I should have like some like piano here so that I can play some music while waiting for the site to build. So if we go back to the browser and hit refresh, I don't know if you know. So this is happening so fast for you to notice, but you can see. So I will try to put that in fast 3G so that you can see what's happening. If you look at the image now, you should see the traced SVG is acting as a placeholder for the image, right? And then there's also another like option that you can add to your images format. So by default, we serve like WebP and a fallback, which is auto, but you can add a like a series of formats that you want on your image, right? So you can have options like auto, AVIF, JPEG, PNG, and WebP. You want to have auto there because it's what helps you default it's what helps you default your image to the like if it doesn't support WebP and all of those other formats that we have, it will just default to whatever the browser supports. And then you can also add like AVIF and have maybe WebP here, and we just want to add this to the two images as well. And we build this again. I was hoping that the build would not take so long this time. So we build this again, and then we check the browser, and I'm just going to put the network back to normal setup. So we've seen the chased SVG, but if you want to really see where this formatting like comes to play, you can check out the inspect the image, and you can see that like when Matt was explaining how the picture element like allows you to have different types of formatting, you can see that by default like it already does that for us with just one line. So you have the AVIF option here, you have the WebP option here, and you have the auto, which is JPEG. And another thing that we can see here is we've seen that we've looked at how like performant it is, and this is just literally one line of code. I just broke it down here so that you can see how easy it is. So we're coding like it's 1995. I think that belongs on a t-shirt somewhere. And so the next component we're going to look at is the, let me clear this. The next component we're going to look at is the Gatsby. It's a Gatsby image component from Gatsby plugin image. So this component helps you to like Matt said, it helps you to get images from third-party services or like images that are changing, right? So you can also add like some of the options we've seen already to this image, and there's like proper documentation for it on how to like implement it, but I'm just going to focus on this one line here because what this does is if you want to see how the images come up, I will just run a Gatsby develop here. So ultimately, what this does is it takes the image. So these images are coming from third parties. So we don't have images at build time, like they come out at runtime. And this is like they're sourcing from the CMS. This current example is using Contentful. So if we go to localhost 8000 and run a refresh, you can see that this is using a traced SVG, which is one of the options that I listed out here. So as a placeholder, so it kind of takes the same placeholders as the static image components, but in like a way that it runs with like, because Gatsby uses GraphQL to source data, and that's how like that's where you put like the options. And if we look at the elements, like if you inspect the elements, you can see that this source set of images are coming from the party that's hosting the images. So that's how we take advantage of performance images and set that using Gatsby image components. So yeah, this is the little demo, and thank you.
Thanks, Abina. I think you need to pass over presenter to me.
Yeah. All right.
Okay. Well, so yeah, thanks for that demo, Abina. I've seen that we've got some really good questions coming in at the moment. So I'm going to try and get through as many of these as we possibly can. In the meantime, if you let me just losing my space here. Okay, yeah, so we're going to try and get through as many of these questions as we can. If this URL that I've got on the screen here, that will take you to the page that will show you how to get started using the new plugin. If you want to follow us on Twitter, Abina is at Abina Speaks, and I'm at Ascorbic. You will find us on there talking about random stuff, but also giving tips about these sort of things as well. I'm going to start now, just going straight through some of these questions, starting from the beginning. Okay, so we've got first question here. Is this demo in Gatsby 3? Yes, the demo is in Gatsby 3. The image plugin is designed for use in Gatsby 3. It can kind of work in Gatsby 2, but Gatsby 2 is now end of life, so we do recommend you use Gatsby 3 for this one. By the more memory usage, that's on the build side, so that's what I'm talking about there. There are some differences on the browser side, but it's not really something that we need to worry about for our purposes. The very expensive part of it is the build, which uses this is referring to the AVIF stuff, and that's the build type. Okay, what is the W unit? So that was in the source set. Now there are two types of unit that you can use in a source set. There's the @ which is the for the pixel density, which is an X unit. We don't use that because it is inflexible. It's telling the browser that it has to use a certain image. The W is the width of the image in pixels. So it's not the width of the screen, it's the width. It's just telling the browser what is the actual width of the image itself. Okay, how can we use this on Markdown or HTML coming from an external CMS? Now, Markdown doesn't directly support it. It does generate picture tags, so the Gatsby remark images does generate picture tags. But CMSs that deliver Markdown, a lot of them do support Gatsby image. Strapi, I can't remember the exact status of Strapi at the moment, but there are lots that are adding them, and that means that they basically transparently replace them with the static image in there. How does this work for background images? So if you go to this URL that's on the screen, I've got an example there of how to do this for background images. Now, it's not, we don't recommend using CSS for background images with this, because the CSS doesn't have much flexibility in the way that it handles things like format fallback, or so you can't say, for example, in CSS, tell a browser to use WebP or AVIF or whatever. So what we recommend for, if you're using this for a background image, is that you use something like Grid, CSS Grid, to stack them on top of each other. And I've got in that URL, I've got an example showing how to do it, and it's a lot simpler than you might fear. It's actually a pretty simple way of doing it. So how are we going through here? Have you got any that you can see, Abina? So okay, so what about, so the deprecated warning about headers? Yes, I think that's coming from a dependency. I'm not totally sure about the way to solve that one. What about SEO? How often does the URL of the image change? That's based on a hash of the source image query. So it won't change as long as the source image is the same. So the XXX hash part of it is a hash on the for the source. So that will not change as long as the image changes. So you can do a long-term caching rules on it. I addressed the markdown thing already. Okay, what are the rules about what gets passed to a source attribute? So the source attribute, the tag on for the source is the if you're referring to the tag that's inside the picture, you would put a source set in there that has lots of different sizes, and then the browser will choose which one. I'm using some high DPI screenshots taken on a Retina Mac. How can I restrict it from scaling to full width? I don't want to set the max width manually. I mean, the thing with this is if you want to restrict the max width, you do have to do it manually, because by default the max width will default to the maximum width of the intrinsic maximum width of the image. So if you want it to be smaller than its intrinsic size, you need to pass that in there, and it will then handle all the other stuff for you. Is there a prop to preload images for above the fold? Yes, it's loading equals eager. If you do that, that will enable our super magic trick that I'm particularly pleased about, which is the loading images before React has even hydrated. So we can do, because we've got some little tricks in there that we can do both lazy loading, but also just eager loading from SSR, because we attach event listeners inside the HTML, the generated SSR HTML. So one of the reasons that we get such good Lighthouse scores compared to the old Gatsby image component is that previously you had to wait for React hydration for the blur up stuff to happen. Now that isn't needed anymore. Now this is now probably the quickest way to load images in React full stop, because we do it pre-hydration. So if you add loading equals eager, you will get that image before React has even hydrated. What is the advantage of setting the image format type if auto will always select the best format for your browser? So auto doesn't select the best format for your browser. Auto is the fallback, so it's the last resort. And auto refers to it automatically uses the input file format. So in Abina's example, auto was using a JPEG as the source image, so it was generating a JPEG as the auto output. So you put auto in there, that basically just means generate a fallback image in the same format as the input. And then you would add WebP or AVIF, or to generate the extra ones. Now the default is auto and WebP. So if you don't pass any formats, that's what you'll get. You'll get the input format and WebP. And the only time you really should change that is if you're also adding AVIF. We strongly recommend to not remove WebP. You won't get full marks on your Lighthouse score if you remove WebP. Okay, I import my images via WordPress backend using standing posts. Are my images getting the benefits of static image by default, or is there something I need to do to get these benefits? So the WordPress plugin, currently what the WordPress plugin does is it downloads the images as you build them, as you do the build, and then you can query those using child image sharp. So yes, you can query them and you will get the same benefits from here. You wouldn't use static image, you would use Gatsby image. But it's documented in the docs. It would be similar. It would be a similar syntax to the one that Abina was showing for Contentful. The difference being that it does download the images, so it's not serving them from a CDN. It's serving them locally, but you can do the same sort of query format to handle that. So Core Web Vitals Core Web Vitals has become a main priority KPI for our static sites, specifically the largest Contentful paint. Is there a recommended ideal configuration for the image component that leads to a fast LCP? Okay, so for people who aren't who might not realize that, the largest contentful paint is basically the largest component on the visible screen during the initial page load, and you can have more than one of them, but this is one of the web vitals, and it's one of the key ones that that the image plugin helps with. Now, the important things for that are that firstly, some of it is just about making sure that everything loads quickly. So that is about making sure that off-screen images are loaded lazily. But if you have images that are on above the fold, one of the good things that you can do is add the loading equals eager on them. And that will give you, that will ensure that they're loaded very quickly. All that said, LCP is generally very good out of the box with the image plugin. I mean, as you saw on Abina's demo, he got a 99 there with a full screen hero image. So if that's your concern, then it should be absolutely fine. But yes, I mean, if you need to optimize it, then loading equals eager is the thing to do. So where are we?
We're getting like a lot of questions. So
yeah,
maybe.
no, I'm just getting. Okay, if you upload a really large image, will all of those formats be created during the build process? Yes. So if you're using if you upload a large image, the images that are generated are not. It will be based on which ones you are using. So it's only if, say, so if you put static image in there, you would, if you've got a massive image, you probably want to specify a width and a height to specify how it's going to be put in there. But if you're doing a full width image like Abina was doing, it will automatically generate breakpoint sizes that are a reasonable mix of breakpoints. So if you upload a 8,000 pixel image, it's not going to generate an 8,000 pixel output image because, you know, very few people want that. Even people with massive screens like Abina's probably don't want an 8,000 pixel wide image on there. So by default, we have a set of breakpoints, and I can't remember the exact ones off the top of my head, but I think there's 6 of them, and they start from 750 pixels for mobile, all the way up to like just under 2000, which is the full HD. We based that on browser and device usage survey data, and we will update that in future versions. So if you don't pass in any settings, it will generate them that are the right one, and then as you update, we will keep updating them to make sure you've always got the best practice sizes. How do you handle images from data fetched over HTTP? So I don't really understand that question. I think, so basically I think this might just be a case of doing it, it's the Gatsby image one for dynamic images. So if these are, they either need to be handled by images that are downloaded and processed locally, or they need to be done from a supported CDN. So for example, most of the main CMSs, that's the word. Most of the main CMSs now have support built into their source plugins for generating the correct output for creating these Gatsby image components. So check your docs and check that link that I've got on the screen there. Does static image work with Gatsby 2? Yes, but not supported by us. It works, but you know, Gatsby 2 is end of life now, as I mentioned before. It should work, but because we developed it during Gatsby 2 time, but the 1.0 release of the image plugin coincided with the 3.0 release of Gatsby, so we do recommend using that. Can I use Gatsby image with SVGs? No, sorry. The thing about Gatsby, about SVGs is that you handle them in a very different way. If we would be processing them, then that would be rasterizing them, which is not what you want normally with an image like that. So really what you should be doing with an SVG, you don't need to do any of these clever things. You can either embed them in directly or just stick them in an image tag. Now, that's how we do the traced SVGs. We embed them directly in an image tag. But so if you are loading something in that might be an SVG or might be a raster image, then you have to include your own logic in there. We do not support it at all. So that is a thing to bear in mind. You need to handle your own logic for checking if it's an SVG. What is the get image method you imported from Gatsby plugin image? That is just a helper. It's literally a little helper function that does a null safe access for the Gatsby image data property. So you pass in either a file object from GraphQL or the image object from Contentful or something like that, and it just grabs the child element that is the right bit of image data. You can do it manually as well, like I had in some of the examples where it was just child image sharp dot Gatsby image data or whatever. It's just a shorthand way of doing it, and it's null safe as well. So it means that if any of the intermediate objects are null, you don't get a type error. Is it possible to pass width, height variables in GraphQL fragments? Probably, yeah. Yeah, you should be able to. I mean, the thing with the GraphQL fragments is that you've either got to do a static query, which you can't pass variables to, or it's got to be a page query. Now, I haven't actually tried that, but I think in theory you could pass it as a value into a page query and put them as a variable in one of the arguments. I can't think of any reason why not, but don't quote me on that. I haven't actually tried it. Worth a try. Report back, send me a tweet. How can I query two different sizes of the same image within one query, a lightbox? So for that, you want to use GraphQL query field aliasing. So instead of the query being Gatsby image data, you would do small image : Gatsby image data, and then large image : Gatsby image data, and that would allow you to do more than one query of the same field aliased, and then you would access those as .small image, .large image instead of .Gatsby image data. So just look up field query aliasing for GraphQL, and that's what you would need to do there. Can we render images dynamically? So there's two ways you can do dynamic images. One of them is in a page query. So that's just doing one of the GraphQL queries. You can't pass in a variable to static image because it is static. So it has to be statically analyzed. You can't change that. But so for dynamic images, you need to either do them as a GraphQL query, or some of the source plugins support dynamic images at runtime. So Contentful does, I think. Shopify definitely does. So Shopify is able to render these Gatsby images using data that's come at runtime. So like shopping cart or search query images. And you can do the same with ImageX images, and there is some stuff with Cloudinary as well. Okay. Is there a list of changes from Gatsby image to Gatsby plugin image plugins, or any house cleaning needed after changing plugins? So if you go to this link, you will find a link from there to the migration guide. That migration guide has got a whole lot of information on all of the things that you need to do to change. I'm going to try a very quick run through on as many questions as I can now, just to rush through them on a quick fire to see how many I can do. Should Gatsby image use the all file query? Probably not, unless you want all files. is there a way to use Gatsby image less structured data, for instance, an image that appears in Markdown? Not really, no. How does it integrate with Gatsby Contentful plugin? No fixed or fluid. There is a new Gatsby image data resolver on in Contentful. There is, look on the docs and the README. When images are sourced from a CMS, what is the particular bit that the source plugin creator has to support to take advantage of the image plugin? There are docs in the specifically for source plugin creators that will show you how to do that. Can you explain exactly what the Gatsby image code mod does? It searches for all references to the old image plugin and image queries in GraphQL and updates them to the new one. You will probably need to make additional manual changes, but it will get you off to a good start. What happens to Gatsby plugin Sharp? Still using it. When we're using a CDN for our images, what are the options? It depends very much on the CDN. So we've got ImageX has got first class support in there. Finally, what's coming next for Gatsby plugin image? So one of the obvious things is new image formats. We would love to be able to try out some of the new JPEG XL things in there. We wanted to add more support for more source plugins to handle things natively. We would really love there's some very exciting things possibly coming with WordPress to use for Jetpack, so that we can have CDN support for the WordPress plugin as well. But really, one of the big things is just getting a lot of support in all of these source plugins so that it works well. Finally, there would be better support in Markdown. So that's what I would like to do. So I think I've answered all of them. If there are anything else that you want to ask, send me a tweet. My Twitter name is on there. I will try and answer as many questions as I can. And thank you very much for all of your excellent questions, and thank you for coming along today.
Thank you, Matt, for answering all of these questions.
Thanks, everyone, and keep an eye out for the recording coming soon to your email. Good day, good afternoon, and good evening all. Bye.